talento político frente a la antipolítica. Un aplauso, por favor. Aquí tengo conmigo a los protagonistas. Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes. Me acompañan Simone Leoni, él es secretario nacional de Forza Italia Jóvenes. Se involucró activamente en la política en 2015 al unirse a Forza Italia y comenzar a participar en su movimiento juvenil. Dentro de Forza Italia Jóvenes, a lo largo de los años, se desempeñó como director de Roma, luego de la región de Lazio y posteriormente del Departamento de Organización Nacional hasta que fue elegido secretario nacional por los miembros. También tenemos, buenos días, también tenemos a Ana Victoria Polikovskaya, activista rusa, que es nieta de la periodista rusa asesinada Ana Polikovskaya. Muchísimas gracias por estar hoy aquí con nosotros. Y por último tenemos a Lorenz Saleh. Muy buenas tardes. Él es expreso político venezolano, premio Sájarov del Parlamento Europeo y defensor de los derechos humanos. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Esta mesa la modera Miriam González Durante, que es fundadora de España Mejor, cuyo objetivo es dinamizar la sociedad civil con propuestas de políticas públicas, apartidistas y transversales. En 2016, Miriam fundó Inspiring Girls International, presente en 40 países, dedicada a elevar precisamente las aspiraciones de las jóvenes, conectándolas también con las mujeres referentes. Así que, todo tuyo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, and we are going to try to do this debate mostly in English, but with a little bit in Spanish as well. And you have with you three very young people, but with very full and perhaps I should even say intense lives in the political arena. And you are in the political arena while there is a trend of enormous shift and change in the world, and in particular in relation to democracy. We are seeing in a very short period of time, we are seeing changes of international alliances. We are seeing how the international world order seems to be crumbling. In certain areas of the world, in the US, we always thought that they were going towards the direction of the rule of law. We start seeing some other trends there. In Europe itself, we are seeing the extremes taking over country by country. And in the middle of all that, we see young people redefining their relationship with democracy. In some years ago, I mean, not so long ago, really, in the 20th century, let's say, it was always assumed that the end point was going to be democracy, that was the way to achieve prosperity, and in order to have that, you needed to have a system with rules. Democracy had rules, and they work, and the others, who were not democracies, didn't work. Now we have a situation where democracy does not necessarily bring prosperity for all, and some are questioning whether democracy really works for their prosperity. We see breaches of rules not only in not democratic countries, but also in some democratic countries. And we are seeing quite a lot of young people telling us, well, you know, perhaps the end point is not necessarily democracy. With a variety of trends, we see disengagement, we see young people moving towards the extremes. We see young people questioning whether the social contract works anymore. And ultimately, we see some young people saying, no, the end point needs to be something else, which is not democracy. And in the middle of all those trends, we have three people who have decided to go totally against the trend, and from very different corners, you are being very active in politics. Can you tell us, are you just a contrario people, or can you tell us what drove you here, and what drives you also in terms of the purpose? And can we start with you?
Of course. Hola todos. but I'll switch to English afterwards. My name is Anna Victoria Politkovskaya. I am the granddaughter of Anna Politkovskaya, a Russian journalist who was murdered for her activity and her work in 2006. It is an honor for me to be here today and to speak to you and represent her legacy here. What drives me further, what drives my work right now as an activist is my intense desire to contribute to whatever is going on right now in Russia. I truly believe that it is important to keep on talking about what's going on in Russia, how people in Russia still live there, what are they thinking about, how they talk about politics and everything. So I believe right now that it's incredibly important to talk about politics and talk about anti-politics as well, because the movement of anti-politics right now in Russia is what keeps the regime intact, because people feel like they don't want to participate in politics because it is too dangerous or just not interesting for them, and nothing will ever change. That's why we have to talk about it more. Thank you.
Simone, can we continue with you?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank El Mundo and Forum Ambrosetti for this amazing event. I think that very few forums talk about young people, and even fewer talk with young people. So I think that is something that makes this event so unique, and I'm very, very happy to be here with all of you. What drives me? It's a hard question. I would say hope and awareness. Awareness that if we, as young people, do not engage with politics, politics will anyway engage with us, will decide our lives. And hope because we live in a political era in which a lot of people, a lot of movements build their politics on fear. And I think that as a youth, we have to go against that trend. We have to build politics on hope. We have to be brave because, of course, it's not easy to go against the trend that we see all across Europe and all across the world. But I think that the first question should be, what's the goal of young people starting to be involved with politics? And I think that should be bringing new and fresh ideas to the stage. Because, you know, when we talk about political renewal, which is, I think, essential to democracy, to modern democracies, we should ask, what's political renewal? Because I think that it's quite like a budget. You have something going out and something coming in. So when you make political renewal, when you vote out an old politician, you lose experience. Maybe it's even a skilled politician, so you lose his experience. And what are you bringing in? Because if you're voting in a young politician that just change gray hair with brown hair, you're not bringing in anything serious. You have to bring in new ideas, a new vision of the war. Because if you do that, you can add a fuel for restoring democracy, for restoring the trust of people into democracy, and for restoring a full democracy that works for the people. Because if democracy does not work for the people, people will start to lose trust on democracy. And we're seeing that also in Europe. We have leaders that campaign on this basis. They said that democracy is not really the best political system, but I think it's the best one. Maybe it's full of difficulties, but it's still the best one.
Very good. And Lauren, from a very different perspective, because yeah, you have a tough life.
Yo de niño me hice una pregunta, porque me enteré que había niños que morían de sed. Porque me enteré que había niños que morían de hambre. Y yo duraba mucho rato bañándome. Y se botaba la comida en mi casa. Y hay momentos cuando sales de tu burbuja y descubres otras realidades. De pequeño me hice esa pregunta, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué tenía que morir niños por sed? ¿Y por qué en nuestra casa podía haber una piscina? Y ese por qué fue a otro por qué y a otro por qué. Y después me topo con una revista de Amnistía Internacional. Y decía, defender los derechos humanos, la profesión más peligrosa del mundo. Y leer eso de pequeño, bueno, ya no era Spider-Man, ¿no? Y ya no era los X-Men. Y te das cuenta de que hay gente que se había hecho esa pregunta y que además creía que un mundo mejor es posible. Y yo compré esa idea de pequeño. Y eso me llevó a pensar y buscar cómo se puede hacer de este mundo un lugar más justo. Y eso evidentemente me trajo muchos problemas. Defender los derechos humanos es defender un futuro, pero también defender la idea de que la historia no está escrita, de que podemos construir y transformar las cosas. El problema es que hay gente que nos quiere convencer, uno, de que esta es la realidad y es inamovible, y dos, de que el mundo es blanco y negro. Nacemos, no escogemos ni dónde ni cuándo, por lo cual somos inevitablemente rehenes de un tiempo y de un espacio. Y como muchos en Venezuela, fuimos rehenes de un tiempo de dictadura. En un territorio controlado por gente armada y muy violenta, que nos quiso imponer un pensamiento único. Yo creo firmemente en los derechos humanos. Es decir, creo que todas las personas tenemos un valor por el hecho de estar vivos. Creo que todos debemos ser respetados y me niego por completo a aceptar lo que hoy me incomoda. Y decidir defender los derechos humanos es decidir molestar el poder establecido. Y sobre todo, enfrentar la idea de que el mundo es blanco y negro. ¿Y por qué? Porque la polarización nos lleva a la radicalización. Y la radicalización, que parte de simplificar la realidad, nos lleva a justificar cualquier abuso y cualquier atropello al otro y violar su dignidad. Y yo, después de vivir lo que he vivido, hoy estoy más convencido que nunca, porque lo hemos probado, de que podemos transformar la realidad y defender nuestro futuro. Y por eso, pese a todo lo que hemos pasado, hoy estoy aquí y frente a todo pronóstico, y aquí agradezco a medios como El Mundo y a periodistas, estamos logrando y lo vamos a concretar que se cierren centros de tortura en mi país. Algo que hace unas semanas era impensable. Y eso es posible porque, al igual que yo, hay gente que cree que esa realidad se puede cambiar y nos ha acompañado en ese sueño. Y lo estamos logrando.
Thank you so much. That's a really good segue. No, they were talking about that in the previous session. The not looking at the world in black and white, and what do we need to bring to the table? What is the talent that we need to bring to the table, not to accept that world in black and white? You all, which is, by the way, the title of the session, talent. And I wanted to ask you precisely about that, about your talent, what you bring to the table. In your case, Anna, you have been relentless at a really early age, but you have had an added complexity, which is the weight of responsibility, if you wish, of the legacy of your family. To what extent that helps you in politics? That could be the legacy of a family or the legacy of many people behind you, that you are taking that power forward. To what extent that helps you or that actually can intimidate sometimes?
Well, that's a really good question. For a big part of my life, my legacy to me felt while living in Russia as something that I have, and it's something I have to go around, because it always caused me rather negative feedback rather than positive throughout all of the years I grew up in Russia. Because for the most of my life, for the most of my childhood, ever since I was very, very young, I would hear remarks about who my grandma was and who she stood up, what she stood up for, what values she stood for. And often I would hear words like, "You're the enemy of the state. You are a part of a family that is an enemy to our state. You say something else that we don't believe in. You're wrong. You should not be saying that." And that whole situation culminated when the war in Ukraine started in 2022, when a massacre in a Ukrainian small town called Bucha happened. And I came to school one day, being in the 9th grade. And what I had to do is I had to speak out, because I did not see a situation in which I could say, no, everything's okay. There was no situation in which I could see myself just being okay with the war, because I carry the legacy of peace building. I carry the legacy of caring about people, about civilians, both in Ukraine, in Chechnya, in other places all around the world. So to me, it becomes clear that there was no other option for me but to speak out, that the war should not be happening, that what Vladimir Putin is doing is a terroristic act. So I realize now that although I face significant consequences for what I believed in, it is what I'm very proud of, because although I had to leave my friends, some of my family behind, I still value that I have all of that legacy, and that legacy led me to where I am right now.
Thank you for that. And Simone, you come in a way from the three of you, you are the one who comes from the more conventional, so to speak, side of politics. And the whole issue of young talent in politics is a massive debate. How have you been able to integrate the being very active from a very early age, but letting the time to develop all those talents and not to feel prisoner of politics, so to speak, that will curtail your freedom to be active, no, and to do whatever is necessary to do?
You know, I think that when you stood up for something, there is always some pressure on you. You have to keep staying calm and being able to have a clear vision of the whole thing. But before you asked what drives us, what is the key point of the talent in politics, I think that for what I do in my everyday life, the core value is courage. So where do I take my courage from? I take it from people like Anna and Laurent, because I'm privileged. I come from Italy. Italy is a democracy. We are all privileged. We come from democracies. But Anna comes from Russia, Laurent from Venezuela, two countries that are dictatorships with brutal dictators that murder people. Countries in which, if you stood up for what you believe, you risk to be murdered. So I think that if they can speak, we all have to speak for what we stood for. In Italy, I became popular last year mainly because I did something that I felt was obvious to do. Just to make a little context, there was a general of Italian army that decided to run in politics. He wrote a book with massive insults to people, just like saying that blacks can't be Italian, gays are normal, or disabled children should be separated from the others. And I stood up. I say that this was not okay, even if that general was elected to European Parliament in a list of a party which is in coalition government with my party. But I think that being active in politics means taking some risks and always staying up for what you think is right. Because if you start not standing up for what you think is right, what's the point of being political active? There is no point in that if you won't fight for what you believe is true and for what you believe is important. Because all across Europe, as we were saying, we see new political movements rising, and very often the traditional parties are not able to draw red lines. Because, of course, as we were saying before during our chat, of course you would say, I don't want to govern with those parties. Sometimes you're forced to. And I think the main thing is we are the next generation of politicians is not doing anything just to govern, just to reach power. We have to draw a red line, very strict red line on rights, on rule of law, and if these movements try to step over this red line, you have to step up and you have to say what you think is right and not standing down.
Y en tu caso, Laurent, tú tienes, aparte de todas las dificultades que hay, del talento que se necesita en la parte política, pues saber persuadir, tener perseverancia, etcétera, etcétera. Tú has tenido una situación personal de ataque a tu integridad física. ¿Cómo consigues que ese miedo te propulse y no te paralice, ¿no?
Regresar a la pregunta. Regresar al momento que me pregunté por qué esto está sucediendo y cómo es posible esto. Los sistemas totalitarios y el poder autócrata quiere cosificar al individuo. Por eso el peligro de la antipolítica. Tú puedes ser antisistema, puedes ser muy crítico, pero hay una línea delgada, ¿no? Cuando de la crítica pasas a rendirte, ¿no? A claudicar. Y cuando el sistema se va sobre ti y te quiere aplastar, te quiere cosificar, él quiere que olvides quién eres y por qué estás en ese momento bajo esa situación. Por eso creo que sí es importante tener, un marco de valores morales y éticos. Nosotros somos más que materia. Y ese esquema de valores y éticos, de saber qué está bien, qué está mal, qué es correcto, qué no, que no es tan subjetivo como nos quieren pintar, no es tan abstracto ni es un capricho, ¿no? Hay unas condiciones mínimas de convivencia. Eso nos permite un marco, es decir, un tablero de juego. Y ese tablero de juego lo tenemos que llevar a la acción, que es las decisiones que tengo que tomar frente a ese momento de amenaza o de miedo o de reto. Y ese esquema de valores y principios te lleva a sobreponerte sobre el miedo. No es fe ciega, no es algo tampoco de la nada. Está bien aferrado a la idea de que la vida es más que un simple paréntesis. Lo seguro es que nos vamos a morir. ¿cierto? En cualquier momento. La vida no puede ser tan absurda. Hay una razón por la cual estamos vivos y esas las descubrimos en esas cosas que nos emocionan cuando respondemos preguntas y nos dan mariposas allá adentro. Recordar esas mariposas, yo creo que es lo que te permite sacar fuerza frente a ese reto.
Lo que viene de dentro, ¿no? En política, que siempre se nos olvida, ¿no? Que tiene que venir de dentro. Can I ask you, they were talking in the previous section, they were talking about social media. And clearly one of the talents in politics is undeniably to be able to communicate. How do you adapt to a current landscape which is so dominated by digital and social media? Sometimes when people my age look at what is happening in the field of communication, it's like if you all young people are being brainwashed and there is somebody there in the background who is doing this and poor little victims without realizing that there is also another side of it. What is your own experience politically in terms of that social media? Is something that helps you? Is something that is an obstacle to overcome? Or is a mixture of both? Can we start with you, Simone?
Yeah.
And we change a bit the order.
It's a complex question. I would say that social media, as every other tool, has pros and cons. Social media now are, one of the main stages from which you can spread ideas. And I think that for a while now, we've seen in some countries new political movements spread by social media. So the fact is that social media has changed forever the landscape of media, of communication, and of course of political communication. So you have to adapt communication, and the way it can work is if you don't lose your values, but you are able to adapt them to that communication, because you think many times people say that young people are attracted by extremism. I think it's not entirely true. I think that young people are attracted by politicians being very direct about what they want and what they want to do. And I think that is something to which also the traditional parties and traditional politics has to deal with. And if we can find a way to adapt historical parties, old politics to a new landscape, we can still reclaim voters and show to these people that democracy can work. So the thing is using social media in the right way, because I think it's impossible to go completely against the trend, but it's possible if you want to use that social media to spread your own view of the world. So you have to be direct, but you don't have to be extremist.
And what about you, Anna? Because you in particular, you work in relation to a country that is well known for being very active on disinformation.
Yeah, Russia currently is an incredibly powerful machine for both disinformation, propaganda, and brainwashing. And because of that, a lot of young people, just like you've said, are being converted to rather extremist movements. They pay a lot of attention to the more rather extreme parts of any political compass. And I think that's also becoming a very big problem, because imagine a situation in which you are 18, 19 years old. You're trying to understand the world around you. You're trying to see what kind of political ideologies are there, what kind of ideas are there. And you don't really stumble upon something rather centrist. If you stumble upon something more extremist, more radical, there is a higher chance you're going to pay attention to that. And if you have access to this kind of more radical ideas when you're growing up, just like we all these days now have, there's a higher chance you would be more interested in something more radical. And that is saddening, but that's the sad reality about growing up these days with social media.
And in el caso de Venezuela, es un poquito diferente también, ¿no? Porque lo que todos conocemos desde fuera es una enorme manipulación de los medios tradicionales, ¿no? En Venezuela. ¿Es esencial para vosotros políticamente como medio de comunicación las redes sociales?
Sí. Bueno, de hecho, el cierre de los medios de comunicación y el secuestro de los medios de comunicación en Venezuela, los medios tradicionales, fue quizás el mayor detonante del movimiento de resistencia democrática, especialmente en el 2007, cuando cierran Radio Caracas Televisión, hubo una reacción inmediata de los jóvenes. Las comunicaciones, bueno, han cambiado, están evolucionando mucho más rápido, de forma exponencial, frente a unas estructuras políticas de poder casi estáticas. O sea, tal cual como está el poder hoy, es casi igual a como estaba antes del Internet, en cuanto a las instituciones. A nosotros poder contar con herramientas en su momento como fue Facebook y Twitter fue un instrumento muy importante para la organización ciudadana, fue un instrumento importante de contrapeso al poder de la dictadura. Sí es peligrosa, la desinformación es un gran reto, pero yo prefiero contar con redes sociales, con todo y el amarillismo que podamos encontrar ahí, que no tener la capacidad de hablar. Y cuando una persona en un pueblo lejano puede poner ahí una información y difundirla, eso tiene un poder fantástico y creador. El tema no es el daño o no que puede causar las redes sociales. Donde tenemos que tener el foco es en el pensamiento crítico. El tema es qué tanto estamos desarrollando y promoviendo el pensamiento crítico, y eso es algo que va desde el hogar, responsabilidad como padres, en las escuelas, en la educación y en las empresas también comprometidas con la libertad, porque también cuando hablamos de política solo pensamos en partidos políticos y se nos olvidan el rol del individuo y el rol de la empresa privada y el compromiso de la empresa privada con una sociedad libre. Entonces, yo apuesto al uso de la tecnología. Gracias a la tecnología, el mundo puede enterarse de que en Venezuela hay centros de tortura. Gracias a las redes sociales, una madre puede decir, aquí me secuestraron a mi hijo. Gracias a las redes sociales yo estoy vivo, porque cuando me secuestraron, si no graban un video y lo montan en internet, me desaparecen. Y se han generado procesos de cambio y revoluciones reales a partir de redes sociales. Entonces, la democratización de la información trae consecuencias, pero también es una herramienta que está ahí. Tenemos que saber usarla, como es la IA. La IA puede ser usada para cosas terribles, pero también te da un poder como individuo fenomenal. Si nos preocupamos por sociedades con individuos adultos y responsables, las herramientas de comunicación son un contrapeso total al poder.
And linked to that, I wanted to ask you all a bit about the trends that you see in young people, because very clearly there seems to be some anti-politics in a way, no? And it's interesting that two of you come from the fight against power in a way, and you, Simone, you come from from within power. You are trying to affect change. To what extent do you think that political parties, the main instruments for democracy so far, can they survive? I mean, are we seeing the the end of the political parties, and young people are looking for something else, which is more a movement, something more across the board, or are we still playing with those, traditional instruments that perhaps we just need to open up and evolve? I don't know.
If you're asking me if classical political parties can survive like they did in the past, I think the short answer is no. But they can do like evolving in within society and with society. Political parties are not just structures, are made up by people. They stand on people. So I think that the duty, not just opportunity, the duty of a political party, which is the main tool to represent society in the structure of power, the duty of political parties should be adapting to new scenarios. Does not mean that political parties should transform into movements or to copy something else, because I always think that electorate choose the original one, not the copy. So I'm not saying that political parties should copy those movements that are rising all across Europe, but certainly I think that political parties, in order to exist, they should change a bit their communication. They should ease some process, and they should be able to, give better answer to the question that comes from society.
But specifically, opening up the political parties, because now we have technology to know what everybody thinks about every moment of the day, really. Is that what we are advocating?
I think that political parties still have a role in that. We should not thinking about deleting political parties, because I think that it's a useful tool in order to elaborate, because of course people want a lot of things, but political parties are there proper for that. They should elaborate proper solutions, because many times we see questions from society that are that people very often think they need a short and easy answer to their question. It's not always that the best answer, so I think that political parties still have a role in that.
And is that how you see it, Anna? Because in a way you are against the power, no? But are you ready to be in a situation, if what you are advocating for happens, to say, now I want power, and I'm going to exercise power, with all that it means, that is compromising as well?
If there is ever such a question, I think I could possibly become a person of power, but what I would really prioritize in my career is transparency, because the lack of this transparency has taught me that it leads to the abuse of power. It leads to horrible things that can happen to a person once they gain power. I want transparency. I want clarity on what I am doing, and I will be showing that.
And in your case, because it's a mixture, no, of political party and non-political party, how open do you think that Venezuela is for everybody who has been fighting for change to say, well, now we are in charge, we are going to, it's always quite difficult sometimes to say there is not just an enemy. We need to propose positive things and deal with all the disappointment that comes from not having easy answers always in politics.
Bueno, primero, creo que sí estamos en un momento de quiebre y los partidos democráticos tienen que abrirse a un gran debate. El cambio que ha habido en las comunicaciones, en las relaciones humanas, empezando que ya las fronteras no son lo que eran antes, la digitalización de tantos procesos, la capacidad de opinar y tomarle el pulso a la colectividad, como lo podemos hacer hoy en tiempo real, obliga a los partidos a revisarse completamente, porque no han cambiado tanto en cuanto a su función y su forma, a cómo ha cambiado el resto del mundo. Entonces, creo que los partidos tienen que profesionalizarse cada vez más, tienen que revalorizar el rol de un político a nivel técnico y no perder el miedo. Creo que a veces los partidos tienen miedo y por eso se cubren bajo el manto de la ideología y del discurso, que bien lo aprovecha al final los populistas desde los extremos, pero los partidos tienen que perder el miedo a la evaluación individual. Es decir, que cada político y que la sociedad lo juzgue al político por sus resultados, por su desempeño y superar, ¿no?, el manto de la ideología y de los discursos. Creo que a eso los partidos le da miedo a esto y con la tecnología hoy tenemos que apostar a que la gente pueda evaluar directamente al político. Y en Venezuela estamos en un proceso ahorita de transición complejo, se está desmantelando una estructura criminal de más de 20 años y no había otra forma que usar a los propios ingenieros de esa estructura para desarmarla. Creo que para que se concrete la transición en Venezuela y abrir este nuevo capítulo tiene que haber ese gran debate de cuál es el rol de los dirigentes políticos y yo apuesto completamente a que los ciudadanos exijamos a los políticos responsabilidades individuales. 2, a buscar la automatización de las tomas de decisiones. O sea, aquí se puede rastrear y hacer seguimiento desde el céntimo que te sacan del bolsillo, a dónde va, cómo se gasta y todo. Eso lo puedes ver en tiempo real gracias a las tecnologías. Esto quizás va en contra de los que les gusta tener el poder centralizado. A mí me parece muy prometedor lo que está pasando en Venezuela, porque estamos empezando prácticamente desde cero. Y creo que sí ha generado toda esta crisis una conciencia social que nos va a llevar a Venezuela a hacer un cambio que debemos prestar atención. ¿Por qué? Porque la forma en la que está terminando de desarrollarse esta crisis es la consecuencia, es el síntoma de un sistema internacional caduco. Caduco. Y nos puede gustar más o menos Trump, pero Trump es la consecuencia y su forma de un sistema caduco de protección de derechos humanos y de justicia. Y ahorita, con esta transición que se está dando, tenemos la oportunidad de construir esos nuevos sistemas democráticos, esos nuevos sistemas de gobernanza y en ese sentido nosotros como diáspora, aprovechando todo el conocimiento y la experiencia que hemos recibido afuera en esto tan doloroso, llevarlo y ponerlo en práctica allá. Así que creo que los partidos políticos en Venezuela van a ser innovadores y están obligados a ser innovadores y el propio sistema de gobierno va a ser algo diferente y no solo en Venezuela. Seguido viene Cuba y vendrá Nicaragua.
Is there, you detect almost there, no, a little bit of acceptance that the world has gone in a certain direction, and that is the landscape that we play with, and the direction has been more towards the conservative and towards the extremes, in a way, if you look at it horizontally. Is that something, Anna, that in relation to Russia you have accepted as well, or are you fighting against all of it all across the board? And when you see in democracy, European democracies, for example, there is now normalization here. There are normalization of some abuses, which are obviously not as terrible as what we have seen in Venezuela or in Russia, but there is a drip, no, of going back on rule of law. Is that something that do you think that young people now need to accept that that is the new scenario and you simply have to accommodate, or are you fighting against all of it?
I've talked a lot about this with my family throughout the years, whether should we be optimistic or pessimistic about Russian future. Throughout the several last years, maybe when the war just started, I consider myself an optimist. But in the last several years, in the last 2 years, looking at what's going on in Russia and how people's living conditions are deteriorating, how the freedom of press is minimal right now, almost non-existent, how people are getting persecuted, they have to go into exile, and people are fleeing Russia, especially those who are speaking out, it really devastates me that this is what my country has become. And although there are many reasons as to why Russian society is becoming what it is becoming, a true society full of hatred to each other, to other people, to other nations, to the minorities, we still have to realize also that it's what so many events have led to whatever is going on right now. Numerous political persecutions, murders, assassinations, and many other things, repressions. They all led to us to this moment where people in Russia have essentially no way to speak out. And even those little tiny opportunities to speak out or to sing an anti-war song like a famous lately band Stop Time did, and then they were exiled. They still have zero to no opportunity to actually speak out. People in Russia don't really have a way to speak out because it has immediate and very severe consequences. And I understand that speaking out in that situation is scary. It's not safe. But there is still hope that there are people who are going to speak out and who can drive some change.
Very briefly, because we don't have a lot of time and I want to take a couple of questions. But you come from a situation, Simone, that you have had to compromise. So you have seen the move towards the right, and you have been confronted with, do you step into power with this movement towards the extreme? Yeah. How do you handle that, and how do you make that not leading to young people being disengaged?
I think, as was saying some question before, I think that you have to draw a red line with this movement because often you're forced to cooperate with them. You know, in Italy, we had kind of success about that because if I think about like 6, 7, 8 years ago, the other parties in our current government coalition, they were saying we want to come out of Europe, we want to leave Europe, we want to leave the euro, we are extremists, we want to like bomb the economy. Now a bunch of things. Now on like fiscal matters, foreign affairs, judicial matters, they're all walking in the line that we draw. Even if my party currently is not the major party in the government coalition. So it does work drawing a red line if you're able to defend that line. Because, you know, these populist movements always try to challenge you. And if they understand that you're not going to defend that line, they're going to step over and over. Okay. But if you have the courage to defend that red line and you're going to defend your values, I think that's going to work.
Yeah. So you think that you move them rather than them moving you?
Yeah.
And Lawrence, ¿Cuándo ves a los jóvenes que se habla de que no me interesa nada la política, es que toda la cosa negativa que viene de la política? No sé, me imagino que una persona como tú, con la experiencia que tienes, es como, pero qué cobardes, ¿no? Porque lo que has tenido que pasar tú, ¿no?
¿Sabes qué pasa? Que yo no veo que los jóvenes
No nos ves a todos como cobardes.
Yo más bien creo que...
Los jóvenes y no jóvenes.
He tenido la oportunidad de trabajar con chicos en los colegios, en las pregrado, posgrado, y tengo una idea completamente distinta a esa percepción de que no. Yo creo que los jóvenes están más interesados que nunca, lo cual le hace desconfiar de los políticos, ¿no? O de muchos dirigentes políticos. Pero la juventud de hoy, además de tener la oportunidad de trabajar en un aula de clase, también soy papá, creo que los jóvenes de hoy están más informados, están desarrollando niveles de conciencia social mucho más rápido que nosotros y que mis papás y que mis abuelos, y sí les interesa el futuro, sí están participando. Lo que pasa es que las formas de participación política y social están cambiando.
Totalmente.
Y por eso hay una idea como que no, los jóvenes se están haciendo derecha. No se están haciendo derecha. Los jóvenes lo que no se están conformando con el materialismo. Entienden que todas las ofertas materiales que se tenían y que nos daban hasta ahora, uno, no son tan alcanzables como antes, y dos, no son suficientes. Entonces, yo sí creo que los jóvenes están interesados, están participando, pero están cambiando los sistemas de participación. Y soy muy optimista desde ese punto de vista.
En España Mejor es también lo que nos decían los jóvenes, que hicimos un poll de 11.000 y todos nos decían que estarían interesados en participar más si tuviesen otros medios de participación, ¿no? ¿Puedo abrirlo a un par de preguntas finales? Por aquí.
Hola. Antes Loren...
¿Hay un micrófono o...? No. Por aquí bien.
Antes Laurent hablaba de que había que exigir responsabilidades a los políticos y tal, y yo la sensación que tengo es que todos los días en los medios de comunicación hay noticias en portada de escándalos, no solo de este gobierno, sino de muchos anteriores, y yo creo que tenemos un poco la sensación de que quejarse no sirve de nada. Es imposible exigir responsabilidades, y quería preguntarle la forma de tomar acción y que quejarse realmente tenga consecuencias.
Claro, es que quejarse, porque en sí, pues bueno, te desahogas un poco, ¿no? Y conversas y tienes temas de conversación. El tema es que hay que pasar de la queja a la acción. Y eso implica ser adultos, ser ciudadanos adultos, ¿no? El poder busca infantilizar a los ciudadanos. Y nosotros tenemos que hacernos adultos. Y hacernos adultos es decir, uno, tener conciencia de que cuando trabajas te quitan dinero. Con ese dinero mantienes a una clase política. Y esa clase política, si tú la dejas sola, va a correr sola. Pero hay mecanismos. Tú puedes hacer tu ejercicio como contralor de lo que está pasando y hacerte responsable y decir, bueno, si vengo en el tren y ese tren me prestó un mal servicio, ir a poner mi reclamo. Y si no pasa nada, ir y saber quiénes son los que están en el Congreso, en la Comisión de Transporte, y exigirle una comunicación y escribir una carta. Y si esa carta no me la responde, ir a las consecuencias. O sea, hay mecanismos. Hay mecanismos para tú hacer control político. Pero si solo nos quedamos en la queja, no va a pasar nada. Esos mecanismos hay que descubrirlos por nosotros mismos, porque lo más seguro es que desde el poder no les conviene que nosotros entendamos bien esos mecanismos. Es como Hacienda y estos organismos burocráticos. Te la ponen muy complicadas para que tú, bueno, caigas ahí en muchas trampas y tengas que lidiar con otras cosas. Entonces, hay mecanismos. Si tú tienes una preocupación por el medio ambiente, bueno, tú puedes escribirle como individuo a la Comisión de Medio Ambiente, no solo del Congreso, sino del Parlamento Europeo. Y ellos están obligados a responderte. Y si no te responden, tú sigues y sigues. Y así es que se logran los cambios. Y se logran. Si yo no hubiese denunciado, mira, para muchos no tenía sentido yo demandar al Estado colombiano en sus tribunales, o sea, usar los propios tribunales colombianos para demandar al gobierno colombiano por el secuestro que me hicieron en Bogotá. Para muchos eso no tenía sentido y eso era perder el tiempo. Pero yo no me quedé de brazos cruzados. Y no solamente me quejé y denuncié, no. Ejercí mi derecho, interpuse una demanda y la gané. Y así muchas cosas. Entonces, lo que nosotros tenemos es que ser responsables. Recuerda que si tú quieres, tú tienes que sacar la basura de tu casa, ¿cierto? Tú tienes dos opciones, o la sacas tú o le dices al vecino que la saque. Si la saca el vecino es más cómodo, pero le estás dando el derecho a que entre a tu casa y una vez dentro de tu casa puede tomar decisiones. O tú agarras la basura, la sacas del pote y la arrojas afuera. Entonces, como ciudadanos, nosotros tenemos que participar. Y la política no solamente es un ejercicio de los partidos políticos que tienen que existir, que tienen que profesionalizarse, pero es que yo hago política, aquí estamos haciendo política, y el ciudadano tiene que participar. Y participen, insistan, fastidien, sean incómodos al poder, porque de otra forma tendrán un cheque en blanco y harán con nosotros lo que les dé la gana.
A partir de ahora todos, ¿eh? Todos a sacar la basura a partir de ahora. No tenemos casi tiempo, pero estoy seguro de que se van a quedar por aquí si les queréis hacer alguna pregunta. But I think that it's a clear example, the three of you, of how the very best of people is like diamonds, no? It comes under pressure. And I think that everybody has seen that we have with us three real diamonds of politics. Thank you very much for your engagement and
so much.
hope to continue seeing you.